Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be showing you how I made this built-in cabinet which has shoe storage at the top and a little area for your laundry basket at the bottom. Now the first thing I did was get Home Depot to cut my plywood into manageable strips, and then when I got it home I measured out the length that I wanted each of my cabinets to be for the top and the bottom, marked that out with my square edge as you can see here, and then I used my circular saw to cut it to the desired length. For some of my smaller pieces I moved over to my miter saw because it was just easier to manage. Once I had everything cut, it is time to prepare for assembly. Now I used pocket hole joinery. This is a pocket hole jig from Kreg. I just drilled about 3 to 4 pocket holes on each of the sides for the pieces that I used for the top and bottom of the cabinet. As you can see here, the pocket holes are facing downward so that when the cabinet is installed, you won't be able to see these holes. I'm also using some corner clamps to make sure that everything is held together secure, as well as some larger clamps so that when I'm screwing these two pieces together, they're just held into place really tightly. And as you can see here, we're just going to do the same thing for the top half of this cabinet. Once you're done screwing everything together, make sure you use your square edge to make sure that all the corners are square. Now to attach the cabinet to the wall when you're installing it, you'll need to include some braces in the back for the top and the bottom. So here I've just cut some strips of plywood and I'm adding some pocket holes, and then you'll see how I install them in the back at the very top and bottom of the cabinet. Once we're done attaching those pieces, we'll move on to adding some holes on the inside of the cabinet for shelf pins. Again, I'm using a Kreg jig to make this job a bit easier. I also realized that it would be easier to remove one of the braces that I had attached earlier, which I did, and I also added some tape before adding the holes because this just helps with rip out of the plywood. This jig is really easy to use and comes with this little placeholder which you just put into the last hole that you drilled, and then you place the jig on top of that. This just keeps all of your holes aligned and straight, and you can drill all the way to the bottom of the cabinet. Now for the back of the cabinet, I used 1/8 inch thick hardboard and used my table saw to cut it to length and width. Once I had that done, I just placed it on the back of my cabinet and used a staple gun to attach it to the cabinet. I did initially use a nail gun, which did not work because it just ripped right through the material, so I recommend using a staple gun. Now to make this project a bit more manageable, since I'm working on it all by myself, I built it into 2 pieces. I just showed you how to build the top half, but I'm not going to show you how to build the bottom because it's the same process. Now I made this little stand for the bottom piece. It's the same height as my baseboards, which will give it that built-in look. Now I again used some pocket holes and am attaching it to the bottom cabinet piece. I really wanted to be budget conscious for this project, so I used a lot of material that I had on hand. Here I'm just cutting a 1x4 into 1.5-inch strips. I'll be using this to build my face frame. To build the face frames, we're going to use those 1.5-inch strips and just cut them to length. Once we have them cut, we're going to use our handy dandy pocket hole jig to make some pocket holes. The best way to build your face frame is to just lay it out and then use some clamps to hold it all together, which will make screwing it together a lot easier. Now normally I would recommend using glue as well as screws, which I just didn't do here because I was in a bit of a rush. Now in order to attach the face frame to the cabinet, you will need to put some pocket holes here as well. For the sides, I'm placing them on the inside of the cabinet, and for the top and bottom, I'm placing these on the outside. Now, if you were smart, unlike me, you would have pre-planned and done this to the pieces before you assembled the cabinet, but I did not, so here I am. I also had to move the bottom base that I built in order to get those pocket holes at the bottom. Once you have that done, I used a nail gun to make sure everything was held securely in place as I screwed the face frame into the cabinet. Now onto the shelves for the top cabinet. I honestly used plywood and melamine, really whatever I had laying around in the garage to make these shelves. But as you know, these materials have exposed edges, so I used edge banding, which is really easy to apply. You just iron it on and you can use a special cutter or a razor edge to cut off the excess. And because I have no patience, I wanted to see how it would look, so I attached my shelf pins and added the shelves just so I could see that everything looked fine before I started prepping for paint. So here's how it looks at this point. The top cabinet is on the left and the bottom is on the right. Now for the last piece of this project is to build a door for the top cabinet. In order to save a little bit of money, I bought a 1x6 piece of pine and cut it down to 2.5-inch strips. Now this is the first time I tried to do a shaker style door, and this was my first attempt. Again, I will say I'm not sure if this is the right way to do it, but this is a way that worked for me. For the two side pieces, I raised my table saw blade about 1/2 inch and ran the sides of them through the table saw like this. The top and bottom pieces will need to look like this and have this little groove that can slide into the side pieces. Now to do that, I ran this piece through the table blade like I'm showing here. Again, like I mentioned earlier, this may not be the correct way to do it, but it worked for me. Now make sure your finger is pretty far away from that blade because this can be really dangerous. You can't see it here, but the blade is only about 1/8 of an inch high, so I made sure to keep my fingers far away. Once we have those pieces cut, it's time to test it out to make sure that it fits perfectly. Make sure that once you attach these pieces that it sits flush on the top and bottom and that the notches are aligned as well. Time to build the frame for the doors. So I just put a bunch of wood glue all over these side pieces and then attached them using a clamp to hold everything in place. If you use a larger clamp to hold it on the sides like this, make sure that you also use clamps on those joints so that it doesn't bend and these pieces stay straight as they dry. I wasn't able to record this part, but essentially you just slide the hardboard into the notches that we had previously cut into the frame of the door. Here I'm using another Kreg jig, which is the Kreg door hinge jig, in order to create the holes for the concealed hinge that will attach the door to the face frame of the cabinet. Now it's pretty self-explanatory to use and pretty easy to install. Once you have the hinge attached to the door, we will move on to the face frame of the cabinet and mark out where the holes need to go, then drill some pilot holes and attach the door to the face frame of the cabinet. Now this was a pretty big door, but I only used 2 hinges and it worked perfectly fine for me. Once the door is installed and everything is working perfectly, it's time to move on to paint prep. Now to make sure you have a nice smooth finish, if you have any of these knots, I just use some spackle to cover them up and then sand everything down, and it covers all of those imperfections. Make sure you sand the entire cabinet and prime and paint. I didn't get a chance to record the process of painting the cabinets, but I'm going to show you how to install them. I obviously installed the bottom cabinet first, and you just want to make sure everything is level, and if it's not, use some shims at the bottom to make sure that it's level. This is really important because if the bottom piece isn't level, the entire cabinet is not going to be level. Okay, so I didn't really get to record this piece, but I'm going to tell you exactly what I did. I am securing the cabinet to the wall. So essentially what I would recommend you do, and what I did, is take my stud finder, run it across that wall, see where the studs are, and then drill your screw directly through the cabinet into that stud. Now I installed a brace piece right here that you can see. That was where I was intending to have the screws go through. And using my stud finder, I was going to do 2 screws, one here and one here, but my stud finder was getting some electrical reading all on this side, even on the side of the wall. So I kind of just gonna leave it alone and then just push this drawer right up against it for more security. To install the top cabinet, I had to call in some reinforcements, cue my awesome dad. Once he helped me get it into place, I initially screwed the top cabinet directly into the wall first, but it was looking a little wonky, and I realized that I had to attach the top cabinet to the bottom cabinet before securing it to the wall. So here I'm just clamping the top cabinet to the bottom cabinet, and then I used some screws to attach the two together while making sure that those face frames are flush. Once I finished doing that, I then make sure you're attaching these cabinets into the wall studs for greater security. Now for the final piece, and to create that built-in look, we're gonna cut some pieces of MDF, prime and paint them, and cover up some of these gaps at the top and bottom. For more details on the tools and materials I used for this project, check out the description of this video. Once you're done nailing these pieces into place, you're all done and you have a built-in cabinet that looks like this. This was such a fun project to work on and so practical. It has given me so much more storage and it just looks really pretty. Thank you guys again for watching my video. Please subscribe to my channel if you want some more DIY tips and tricks, and leave a comment and let me know what other kind of projects you want to see. Thanks again. Bye everyone.